Hey guys, my name is Ryan and welcome to Overwatch Central. So it comes as no surprise that Pharah is an incredibly popular hero right now, and we've spoken about her in the past in our first master guide with Valkia way back when. Since then, a lot has changed. We don't necessarily want to focus on when to play the hero, what she works well against, what counters her. We want to look at some mechanics, specifically when it comes to movement and also aim precision with the direct rockets. So in this video, I jumped into a custom game with Valkia and we went over the mechanical fundamentals of Pharah. So I'm here with Valkia in King's Row on a custom map, and I wanted to talk first of all about movement and cooldown usage really, simply because what you'll find a lot is maybe an attacking Pharah coming in, being stuck in an area where they don't have any cooldowns, and from this distance you're easy pickings for even a Zarya on the ground and stuff like that. So first and foremost, Valkia, if I was a soldier on the high ground, which is sort of spotted out a lot, how would you get there and what are you trying to do as well?
Alright, so for example, if you were a soldier up on the high ground on the top right hand side, first of all, what I would do is I'd try and get as close to you as possible before I sort of set my attack. So my attack consists of using my concussive blast and my boost to kind of get close to you to create pressure. So whenever I explain about shooting any sort of hit scan as Pharah, it's always about creating pressure, because the more pressure you create, the more likely that hero or that person is to mess up their aim, and that can happen all the way up to, you know, a high level. If you're right on top of somebody, it can cause a lot of problems. So for example, if I was shooting somebody which was on a higher level than I'm currently at, that's going to require me to use both of my abilities unless I'm right below you, because then you won't be able to see me. So if I'm right underneath you, you can't see me. All I need to here really is going to be my my boost to go up and to shoot. However, if I'm coming in from a bit of a range, because most likely I'm not going to be able to get that close without you not seeing me, so what I'll be using is concussive blast and then a boost in kind of combination. So first concussive blast on the floor, boost up, and as soon as I hit my boost, I fire a single rocket in towards you. Now this is where you need to practice to try and get one direct rocket straight off. So boost up, one rocket straight in, and then you put the second rocket straight onto the hero. So as soon as they start taking damage, they're already kind of freaked out a little bit. They're a bit more concerned. They're thinking about getting heals, and they have to be very accurate if they're going to be able to take you down while you're coming up to them. Now, the other way you can do this, for example, if you were below them, you can use your boost and then you can use concussive blast. If soldier puts down his healing, you can use a concussive blast to take him off the healing, and then he just needs a secondary shot, or one shot and a splash damage to take him down. So that's kind of one way of taking out a hit scan. Of course, you have to be very careful because you're very prone to hit scans, but if you work around the environment, then it's something which becomes less of a problem, where people think it's more of a problem. You know, most people think of you flying out like this, like, hi soldier, you know what I mean, like flying around the middle. This is how most people in their minds see a Pharah, just flying around in the middle of the sky, open to every single angle. Whereas most likely what I'm doing is I'm on the floor planning out a route. So, you know, I come up, take down the soldier, and as soon as I've done that, I'm safe up on the high ground. You know, they can't see me from the archway on the floor. If they're protecting the zone, the capture point below, they can't see me. And now I have a nice little route that I can kind of run around, keep myself safe. I can even do like peek shooting, so I can use crouch, shoot and crouch, and get myself, onto the high ground. Most likely they're not going to have anybody ready to contest on the high ground if they haven't got somebody up here already. So you can even use this. And one route I do like to take is actually going around the back here. By this time, my cooldowns are already back. You can take a couple of shots on the healers. Normally you've got the healer standing around here. Sometimes Mercy's around the corner. And if you get into any problems, you can just go straight back up to the high ground and back into the archway, because then you've got the high ground again. If anybody was to come and contest you, if your team are already pushing in, they might already be able to push up to the high ground and you have support. So you've actually got quite a nice coverage of area once you get up onto this high ground up here. And it's kind of sneaking around, not just flying in the middle of the air.
I don't necessarily want to focus on each of the maps in particular, but I imagine some maps are better than others when it comes to this, because you do like to sort of hug corners a lot like this, using it as cover, just being not necessarily as out in the open. I imagine Anubis is really good at this, second point, but are there any other maps that you're just like, I can't really play Pharah on this map just because it's so open, there's no cover, there's no walls to sort of hug?
Yeah. So the obvious one is Ilias Ruins, because it's just so open. You have to stay very low. Sometimes I even go below the level of like the side of the map, so I can kind of sneak around to try and get close to my targets. But it's such a open map. If you don't already have the point in your favor, it's very difficult to get in and to try and contest and to take, because any dive attacks, which are the ones that I just showed you then, are so open, they'll see you coming from a mile off, so you're just easy to shoot down. So if they're, you know, depending upon what level you're playing at, if they're very good at shooting, you know, with hit scan, then you're your primary target, very easy to take down. You can do, you know, running along the floor and shooting shields, but then you kind of lose your effectiveness, considering you're, you know, a flanker, and that's kind of what you should be doing, is going for the back line. If you can't get the back line, then it kind of nullifies what Pharah should be doing.
So you do play Pharah as a dive hero, like dive is really popular at the moment, so you just kind of replicate that with Pharah as well, just getting really close to the back line, causing pressure. When it comes to situations where both your cooldowns are sort of off, you've used them both, and you're in a situation like this, what do you do? When you're like sort of out in the open, low on fuel, how do you cope without immediately getting killed? Or is it all about making sure that you don't end up in those situations?
Yeah, so it's about foresight and planning. So if I was to go, let me show you an example of this. So if I was to go to the back line, so I'm about to go around to the archway over here. Now, I've used my boost, but I know if I go down and start shooting, I can use my concussive blast and get myself back out to safety. This is planning from my end, because I know if I use my concussive blast to get in and my boost, if I get stuck in this area, like now, and I got nothing, I have to get out in front of everybody, and this is a really bad thing to do, and it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get taken out. The only other thing I would do, if I was to use both of them, is if I was going to get ready to use my ultimate. So, for example, I'd, you know, use it on the statue, go over here, get myself a bit of speed, because speed kind of adds to that element of surprise, and people don't really see you coming, of course. And that's what you need to do if you want to have a successful ultimate as well. But if you're, going in, always plan that if you're going to run out of an ability or out of fuel, try and think, you know, where am I going to keep safe? Are there health packs around me? You know, what hero am I going to be contested by? Is it something that even if I have no abilities left, but I can just use, you know, rocket accuracy to take them down?
When it comes to moving around the map, especially with the conch flying stuff, have you got any other tips with situations like that? Because you move so swiftly around the map that I just wondered if there were any bits of information that you could give that sort of help with that.
Something that I haven't really acknowledged myself that I do is when I'm doing concussive blast, I'll kind of plan the route out in my head as I'm going around. So I'll kind of smoothly fly around after the concussive blast, in like kind of, you know, in a way which I know that I'm not going to concussive blast and get myself stuck on a wall. Now that's the worst, when you're using it to try and escape, but you get yourself stuck. You know, it does happen to me, but after practice you can kind of get better and not put yourself in a situation where you're going to concussive blast onto an object and get yourself stuck. So I think it's about, you know, planning a route which is going to be in your favor if you're trying to get out. So I use my concussive blast mainly for getting out of tricky situations more than anything else, and using it maybe to get yourself closer to a health pack. So if I know there's a health pack up on the high ground up there, I can kind of use it to get myself up and get myself onto the health pack.
Okay, so you use it more defensively. Yeah. I guess you only really use it offensively just when you're coming out of spawn at the start of a map and it's just fly up.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll use it to speed myself back up to my teammates. I'll use it to get ready to put an ultimate onto the enemy team, because of the speed it creates. And I'll also use it to boop enemies off bridges and so on. Like if I know there's kind of like that golden boop, Lijiang Tower Garden Stage, for example, on the bridge, then that is something which is definitely worth doing, because if you can take out one of the enemy team right at the beginning of a match, then you know you're up one player. It's a 5v6. I've been using it more recently to try and knock soldiers off the healing pads, but a lot of the time when I dive soldiers, I've used both my abilities, so I need to try and figure out a route that I can get closer to my enemies without having to use my concussive blast. If you have your concussive blast saved, that's pretty much one of the ones that's going to keep you alive the longest.
How about when it comes to fuel and just making sure that you have enough constantly, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're on the ground when you're fighting. How do you tend to manage the fuel that you have, and how do you make the most of it? Because you very rarely hit the floor. Yeah,
so with fuel, it's kind of foresight again. You make sure that you know where you're most likely to run out of fuel, and have you got a safe place that you can refuel? Now, technique for not losing fuel is for tapping. So if you're kind of tapping, so I use spacebar to fuel.
Okay.
If I let go of spacebar, you'll notice that the fuel goes up. So you'll always refuel as you're falling in the air, minus if you're falling on rooftops, because that won't regen. But that's one way that you'll kind of reward yourself with a bit of fuel back. If you kind of, I always say fly in a straight line, because if you fly in a straight line and you're not going up and you're not going too far down, then that means that you can kind of stagger your fuel enough to get you to most places that you need to be, and even enough to use enough fuel to get up onto the high ground. Now, I always recommend that you use your fuel instead of using your boost in certain situations where you don't need to use your boost. I know it sounds obvious, but for example, some people might use their boost to get into the window up here, when actually, if you use your fuel correctly, you can get up here without needing to use your boost, giving you both your abilities still free. Whereas I've seen people using their boost to get up, having to wait, you know, the cooldown, the 10-second cooldown to get back in and carry on with the fight. So using the fuel cleverly in that way is something that I highly recommend.
Do you ever sort of end up in a situation where you're in the open, and because you said you want to be flying in a straight line, do you ever have to sort of AD strafe at all in the air? If so, how do you try and make yourself hard to hit when out in the open?
This is normally against other Pharahs, so I'll use a non-common pattern. So for example, most people when they're playing Pharah will just move, you know, left and left and right, and that kind of, if you're trying to take another Pharah out of the sky, you can work on this pattern. You can see how fast they're moving left to right. So what I might do is I might go, you know, right, left, and I might let go and drop a little bit, and I'll go high and drop a bit to the left, and then carry on going left, and then a bit to the right. And making yourself more unpredictable is definitely better, especially when you're fighting another Pharah, for example. Now, I never normally recommend to fight another Pharah, but there will be times when you'll have to. Making yourself harder to hit is definitely something. So don't get fooled into thinking left and right is the best thing to do. Yeah, it's still difficult to hit somebody, but if you're, you know, doing something which they don't really expect, then you can have the upper hand on them.
I guess as well, it's about not using cooldowns in front of them. So if they know that you've just boosted, you've just conked, then that's put them in a situation. But I've also heard stuff like trying to get above the other Pharah. Like if you're trying to sort of fight them, just trying to get in this situation is perfect. Just,
yeah, well,
again, similar to sort of the soldier thing, getting above them and trying to put pressure on them above, making it harder for them to hit.
I've never, when I fault another Pharah, I never think about getting above. I just try and look for patterns. If they use concussive blast, I know how fast they'll move in the air, so I'll put a rocket where I know they're going to end up. One of the best ways of taking out another Pharah is actually boost rockets. So a boost rocket is where you use shift and you put a rocket at the same time. Because of the speed you move it actually kind of gives you more accuracy than normal, because it's kind of, if you get the timing right, you can do loads of damage. So if I'm kind of flying below you around here, I'm going up, I can kind of boost up, put the rocket in, and I don't really need to be kind of looking at where you're moving to, because it's so fast. It's just something which you can be very accurate with, or more accurate than if you're just flying.
So would you say that's one of your key tips then? Because you said it with a soldier thing as well, just having a preemptive strike as you're getting close as well, just to add a little bit more confusion, I suppose.
It's something that I use with Roadhogs as well. So you preemptively know when they're about to hook. After you play versus Roadhogs for quite a long time, you know when they're about to hook, and so you boost up, you put a rocket into them. And you can actually 1v1 a Roadhog because of their size, but you have to be very careful, because if they get the right click, you need to kind of drop out the sky, use your concussive blast to get around them. There's kind of like a certain pattern that I use versus Roadhogs, because you need to move as quickly as possible. Going right above them as well is making somebody look directly up is very difficult as well, and especially for hooks. So that's another thing that I do. But it's not something I recommend, but it's something that you can do.
Okay.
With practice.
We spoke a little bit about fighting Pharahs in the air, so I guess that takes us nicely onto the second section, which is sort of predicting shots more than anything. Can be really difficult for Pharah to do, to know where the enemy's going to end up, and you can land those shots, especially for mobile heroes like Tracer or a Pharah or anything else. So I wondered if you had any rules that you try and abide by when it comes to fighting the enemy and working out how to get those direct rockets up, because you're incredibly good at doing those yourself. So is there any way that you sort of follow it, or is it just more practice and
So a lot of it, you know, I can preach about it, but you have to kind of experience it. So 3 gun rules. Genji's always got his deflect, D.Va's always got a defense matrix, Roadhog has always got his hook. There's 3 things that you've always got to keep in mind, unless you see them used. But it doesn't really matter about defense matrix because it's always available forever and ever and ever. But so for example, you'll notice when a Genji's moving about, you got to try and put yourself in their shoes as they're running around. So they're concerned about their own safety as well. So you got to think, right, if I was at Genji and I took a little bit of damage, where would I go to keep myself safe? Where is the closest health pack to him? Where's his healers at? Because normally Genjis are, you know, much more forward than the healers are, and they have to rely on getting health packs. And so you got to think to yourself, which way would they go? Have they used their double jump? Have they used their deflect? When a Genji does a wall run, it's very easy to hit them. When Genji does double jump, if you practice air shots, it's pretty easy to hit them as well. But it's per hero, you've just got to keep an eye on what abilities they've used, and they all have like a pattern of, like a typical pattern of what they do. And this is where it separates the pros out, because the pros will use non-typical patterns, which makes them very difficult to hit, or they'll make pushes that you won't expect. And that's kind of what takes, you know, a player to the next level. So with a Genji, track with your eyes. I know it sounds stupid, but look at the route he's taken. People like to work off patterns. So Genji might, you know, he might go up, put a few shurikens in, then move to the right hand side, drop down, and do the same thing again, like kind of like in a bit of a circle or a square. And you can kind of recognize that pattern. It's about looking at the pattern. Tracer, looking at where she could rewind. So every time you see a Tracer moving, think about 3 seconds ago, where was that Tracer? Because then you can put a rocket on to where she's going to be rewinding to. Soldier, has he used his health pack, or is he going to run to the closest health pack? It's just, a lot of the time, it's just playing and trial and error and dying in situations to find out what these patterns are from these people. And that's how you know, I excelled with Pharah, because I was able to work out the patterns of how people play, the most common things that people do. You know, you shoot a Widowmaker and she's gonna drop down, but when she drops down, is she gonna drop down to the left or the right, you know, whatever map, and most likely she's gonna drop closer to the health pack, so you can predict the rocket as she's falling down that she's going to be dropping onto the left hand side and get like a nice direct rocket. It's just, like I say, it's just about being in that situation enough times to really see how that player moves and how that player does what they need to do and keep themselves safe. And then eventually you'll notice that actually turns into a pattern across not just 1 or 2 players, but many players who actually play a certain hero, because that is just the way they move or the way they do things, and that's how you
yeah, so let's take that onto the other side as well, learning other behaviors, but also how do you avoid creating a movement pattern yourself? Because I'm very much a kind of person that ADs too much, and I think it's incredibly predictable to play. So in your mind, how do you try and kill that habit, basically?
Well, the thing is, I don't fight too many Pharahs. To kill the pattern, you just have to. It's almost like you have to force yourself. You have to use willpower to stop yourself being in the same pattern, and trust yourself that if you do something different, then it could make you a better player as well. So not to be scared to try something new. But for example, when I'm going in for the kill on the soldiers, where I'm using the concussive blast and the boost, this is something which I can't really change because I've used both of my abilities. I can't really do any movement changes. What you can do is when you're on the floor, because when you're floating in the air, you're very slow, but when you're on the floor, you can actually stutter quite well, or stagger like your movement. And that's, again, if you're fighting a McCree or something from a little bit of a range, that can make you a hard target to hit. You know, they have to have incredible aim, and if you're putting rockets, you know, directly onto them, or I'd recommend shooting just below their feet, because if it hits them on the legs or the feet, it still counts as a direct hit. But if it doesn't, it still counts as splash damage. But if I'm shooting like horizontally onto you, if I miss you, then I'm doing no damage because it's going straight onto the wall behind. Yeah, you want to shoot kind of a bit of an angle, towards the bottom.
A rule that I've heard as well with Pharah, which I've heard for quite some time, like sort of when the game was launched, was this sort of corners rule. Like if you want to hit somebody, you want to be aiming to one of the 4 corners of their hitbox. Is that something that you sort of agree with, or you just think that's too predictable?
I just try and aim for center mass. So if I'm looking at you, I'll always try and hit for you center if you're a Pharah, or I'll try and hit your center. So I'll be trying to angle slightly from above and trying to hit like your center to the floor for the splash damage. But I've never really had that sort of rule. I just kind of practiced on hitting directly onto the target, not thinking about like hitbox at all. Just think of you as the hitbox, nothing around you.
Did you play against bots or anything like that? Does that help you warm up in the practice range, stuff like that, or is it just play loads of competitive?
You can practice. So a lot of people struggle with direct hits, but I can recommend the custom games, custom settings, including bots that don't hurt you, that kind of run around. You can do Lucio bots because of the speed. You can even increase the speed of how fast they move, and that is something that can just help you practice tracking, putting rockets in, practicing rockets. You can even practice dive rockets, concussive blasting. So yeah, you can practice a lot of the techniques, but the thing is, bots to real humans is, a world of difference. So you can only real gain the experience versus the human player in competitive game. You can do quick play, but obviously quick play is a very mild version of what you'll be finding, especially if you're trying to become organized. So that's something I'd always say as well. Combos, working combos with your team. Always team communication is massively key, because as Pharah is a flanker, you are gonna be flanking around the back, and if your team don't know what you're up to, they might start coming on you like a ton of bricks and say, what are you doing? Why are you throwing? So on. But if you say, right, I'm going around the back, take out the healers, and I'll come back. If I need heals, I'll press X, or I'll call to the Ana exactly where I am. Ana, top window, top right, bottom left. Ana, I'm right behind you. That's something that really helps put confidence in your team as well, especially the healers. As if you're in the air, you're a harder hero to hit for Ana.
You've done a pretty extensive guide when it comes to movement as well on your channel, so I guess finally, where can people find these videos, and also where can people find your stream as well?
Sure, so you can find my videos on youtube.com/Valkia. Got a lot of Pharah guides, Pharah dedicated guides on direct hits and kind of more in depth on topics that we've spoken about. And you can find my stream. I stream every day at twitch.tv/Valkia.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. Very similar to the master guides, if there are any heroes that you would like us to discuss when it comes to mechanics, how to land more hooks as Roadhog, headshots as Hanzo, those kind of things, then let us know in the comments below, and also who we should speak to. But until next time, take care. We'll see you then.